So I'm back again, everybody. I haven't forgot about the steering rack install. I just had a few other things go on. It's sort of one of those things where, you know, when you get to a certain point and there's other things that you need to do, you might as well go ahead and do them because you're already there. So basically what has happened since I pulled the steering rack out and prepared the new one to be installed, I knew that I needed to reseal the driver's side valve cover gasket, or just replace it rather. The passenger side really wasn't leaking, and I kind of decided not to really worry about it. But the main thing for me was that the oil pan, the seal around the oil pan, it just wasn't really holding up. So right now I actually have the oil pan out of the car. It's clean. It's ready to go back together. I've also taken the power steering pump apart and replaced the bearing and all the seals in it, which the actual housing is upstairs in a plastic bag as I've been too lazy to bring it down here. But I do have all the seals and everything here, and then pretty much everything is cleaned and ready to go back together. So that will also be happening probably in the next 24 hours or so. But the main reason for this video is this. I found out that Subarus, while they might be Lego cars, they're not exactly super easy to work on when it comes to doing either head gaskets, valve covers with the engine still in the car, but it's not impossible. So just as a guide, if anybody has a 98 Subaru or maybe a Legacy or Impreza, anything with an EJ25 that's packaged similar to this, if you're gonna do valve cover gaskets, this is what I would recommend doing because of my own experience. So the first thing you're really gonna worry about is get your air box out, the tube that runs to the mass airflow sensor and where the air filter sits. You want to go ahead and take that out. Your torque stop, whatever you'd want to call that, I can't remember honestly. Just a bolt and a nut that runs through here. It slides back and forth. You want to take your upper radiator mounts loose and use them for places to hold your screwdrivers, like I do. And really the reason for this is that you're going to need to loosen your lower engine mounts. There's two 14 millimeter nuts that hold it to the cross member underneath the car. And the reason that you need to do this is, at least on the driver's side, there are 6 bolts that hold the valve cover in place. 5 out of the 6 are pretty easy to get to, but the lower right hand bolt, which you can kind of barely see right there, that one's kind of a pain in the ass because you can see how close it is to the body of the car here. If you have gear wrenches, it's absolutely advised to use them in this situation. But what makes this easier is to actually jack up the engine with the motor mounts loose so that you can gain better access to that. And by doing that, what you do in that situation is similar to what I have here. You have your jack, and in my case I have a couple of chunks of 4x6 just left over from a construction project at home here about a year ago. I jack them up in between the transmission pan right here and the differential housing, and let's see if I can get a good shot. right where you see that stud, there's a 14mm bolt and a washer, and that's the bottom side of your engine mount. And you got one on both sides of the engine. Take that loose. When you jack this up, you probably go about an inch, inch and a half or so. And that'll help you gain access to that lower right-hand bolt on your valve cover. Also, in my case, I've decided to reseal the oil pan since it was leaking. This is just one of the baffles that's not really part of the oil pan. It's really more where the pickup goes. It's just sort of part of that. So, as you can see, I've got the oil pan out of it too. And I'll explain more what you do with that to get the oil pan out. But in the case of the valve covers, both the valve cover and the oil pan will need this sort of treatment here, where you undo your motor mounts and jack the engine up in order to gain some access to fasteners that you just really can't get to otherwise. Some things to note, at least about the dual cam and probably the single cam engines too. When you have your valve cover off, and you're gonna have to kind of finagle it out of there, sort of just snake it out of there, where both your cams are on the underside of this valve cover. So we'll just say there's one right here and then one further down there. There's like caps underneath all of this that secure the camshafts, and they're kind of like half spheres that go over the camshafts. You want to put a little dab of ultra gray on both sides, on both of them. So 4 dabs on this side. I've seen people do it differently, where they run a whole bead all the way down. I honestly don't foresee there being any issue with just doing 1 dab at each corner. So if you have any further questions about that, then I would recommend looking at Brian's Mobile 1. You may also want to check out Mr. Subaru 1387. These are some of the channels that I look at to learn what to do when it comes to repairs on Subarus. Most of the stuff that I've done to this car, repair-wise, has been based on the things that I've already looked up on YouTube. And I will tell anybody this: if there's something that you don't know and you want to learn how to do it, YouTube is the place to do it. Right, onward. So, oil pan. I pulled the oil pan out of this car because it was leaking, obviously. And I used probably about 6 cans of carb clean, brake clean, whatever clean I had. If you're going to do an oil pan on a Subaru, or really any car for that matter, you want to make sure that around the flange, all the way around, you don't have any gasket or gasket maker, silicone, anything. It's got to be clean, like eat off of it clean. Same goes for where it mates to, so on the bottom side of the engine block. And I've not quite finished cleaning this up. I just had a lot of different things going on. And by the way, that's what 225,000 miles looks like, and it probably really wasn't taken care of the way it should have been. So I'm probably definitely going to be using a little bit of seafoam on the next oil change. To get the oil pan, you're going to want to jack the engine up the same way as you would to do your valve covers. And the reason for that is for probably, let's see, about 6 of these bolts. You're not really going to be able to get to these with the engine sitting on its own mounts. So if you jack the mounts up, or you jack the engine up and take the mounts away from this cross member that runs here, you'll have at least to have a little bit of access to that. They're all 10mm bolts, and what I used at least for the last 6. I actually had a 3/8 drive ratchet, a wobble extension, so it just sort of wobbles at the end, so it's kind of like rounded a little bit, so it allows your socket to kind of move a little bit. And then I put a reducer to a 1/4 inch on that U-joint, and then a long or deep well 10mm 1/4 inch socket to get the last few. I found that the 3/8 socket, this here, was actually a little bit too thick between the outer part of the oil pan that was still there and the bolt. I couldn't get it to bite, so I had to switch to a 1/4 inch, and I was finally able to get it. Now what you're looking at actually isn't what there should be. I took this baffle out right here, mainly just to clean it and to sort of inspect what was above it, because I couldn't see the crankshaft or anything like that. And then below it, I still need to clean it, but the oil pickup tube, and these are all 10mm fasteners. Torque specs, I believe, are 7 foot-pounds, but don't quote me on that. You may want to look at Mr. Subaru 1387's videos on his oil pan reseal job. And I think what I'm going to do now, before I actually even put this oil pan back, is replace these engine mounts. I've already got them anyway. Rock Auto's been basically my best friend with this project. And if anybody doesn't know about Rock Auto, if you go to any parts store like an O'Reilly's or an AutoZone or Advance, they're going to charge you at least twice the amount of what you would get from Rock Auto. So if you're willing to wait a couple of days for shipping and you know exactly what it is that you're looking for, then Rock Auto is really honestly the way to go. Parts stores will gouge you pretty fucking bad. So maybe a certain few things I go to the parts store for is basically like oil and filters. Anything else that I need for a car, it's coming from Rock Auto. And if I can't get it from Rock Auto, then it's coming from a dealership. And if it's not being able to come from a dealership because it's discontinued, then it's coming from a junkyard. And that's the way I've always been about cars and stuff that I work on. Oh, hey, look, I've got a CV boot wide the fuck open, and that'll be a later video, so you guys can enjoy that, because I'm going to actually attempt to rebuild my CV axles instead of just replacing them like everybody else does. Yeah, so there's that. And in case anybody was wondering, the first video I actually ever shot on this car says, I dropped my fucking phone, says that this car is named Dusty, and there's a story behind that. When I bought this car, I drove it to work, a coworker of mine says, oh, well, Bram's coming in with a very dusty Subaru, so that's where the Dusty name came from. So Dusty is the name of this Forester. Not that anybody really gives a shit, but that's the name of this car, and so it's sticking. I honestly never named my cars before, and there's going to be videos later on about my other cars, projects, whatever you might have. I believe a little while ago I mentioned that you take your upper radiator mounts loose, and the reason that I said that, and the reason that you might see other videos or other people that work on Subarus say that, is for this. If you have common sense, you'll get it. If you don't, then, well, you're just a fucking idiot. But when you jack the engine up, it's gonna come up and sort of back a little bit. And when that happens, this upper radiator hose right here is going to pull against that radiator. So if I have this jacked up, this radiator actually might be sitting further back like that. If you leave that attached, I'm not saying that it will, but it has an opportunity to pull that hose right off the radiator, probably break the radiator where it attaches right there. Then you're going to have bigger problems. Because I don't know about you, but I've heard that bleeding the coolant system on a Subaru is really, really important, and it's not something that you want to get wrong. So if I open this cooling system on this car when I'm not really ready to, then I definitely don't want to have to go through that. I don't want to have to put a radiator in this car. I don't want to have to buy anything that I don't need for it. I've already spent more money in parts that I'm going to replace on this car than I paid for this car. So the less that I spend for more parts, the better it's going to be. And since we're already at 16 minutes, if anybody's wondering why I'm doing what I'm doing, I just want a winter beater, but I wanted something more than just that. I want to lift this car. I'm going to do King Springs, and I've been thinking about 2-inch spacers. And I really would like to use this car off-road as sort of an off-road toy, because it's basically the only all-wheel drive, four-wheel drive, whatever it is that I have. My little pickup truck's 2-wheel drive, and then my sleeper car, it's not all-wheel drive. It's not that it doesn't do any good in snow, in a big heavy Buick, but I would rather, if I'm going to slide off in the ditch somewhere on icy roads, snowy roads, whatever, I would rather it be this fucking car than, something that is nicer than this. The paint on this car is not worth the fuck. It's pretty shitty. The windshield's cracked. The interior ain't that good. I mean, thank God the seat warmers still work. And the car actually runs pretty good. It just needs help in some places. So that's why it's in here. It's springtime. It doesn't need to be on the road. It's not snowy. It's not icy. So here it sits. This is my spring summer project, and hopefully I can get it done before October, so I can get it inspected and not have to pay a fucking late fee because North Carolina, you suck balls. So yeah, so this is all my rambling. More shit to come along. I gotta put exhaust stuff in it, and I've been really playing around with this Metal Rescue stuff. In case anybody hasn't known or hasn't seen what Metal Rescue is, you basically add one of these for a gallon of water, and you just dip rusty shit in it. And over time, it starts to turn into this black, nasty fucking crap, but it will take rust off of pretty much anything. These are the little brackets that go around steering rack on the Subaru, and they are now rust-free. So, let's see, this is front sway bar brackets and all the bolts and everything for the link mounts and everything. So, yeah, Metal Rescue actually does a pretty damn good job. I'm really surprised by it. It was worth what I paid for it. It gets really dark and nasty as you use it. Starts out clear, but as it eats rust off of shit, that's what happens to it. And I plan to use plenty more of it on this car because Subarus are sort of rusty. They get that way really easily. This car's got its fair little amount of rust. Granted, it's not a northern car. It's not that bad, but it's bad enough for me to be a southern car. So, but anyway, guys, yeah. So that's what I'm dealing with, and I hope you guys enjoy what I've got here. So, yeah, if you're working on your Subaru, have fun. cuss it out when you break a bolt, and that's basically it. So, yeah, I will see you sometime later.